The WIide Awakening presents the WIide Awakening Radio Show with Jennifer Hough. Breathe deep as we take a journey together to the leading edge of consciousness. And now, here is author, speaker, and awakening coach, Jennifer Hough.
Well, hello and welcome everybody. This is Jennifer Hough, and I'm here with my co-host Adam Lamb tonight. We are going to have, I know this is going to go deep. I just already know this is going to go deep. Anytime you're talking about addiction, and of course tonight we're talking about what it takes to change your addiction to anything. And we're talking about what it takes, but let me just say that there are some different kinds of addiction. There's substance addiction, there's thought addiction, there's addiction to certain behaviors, and it all comes down to some pretty similar things that are happening in your biochemistry when those addictions happen. And some are definitely much more easy to break or are more accessible than others. Let's just say that the mission for tonight is, instead of talking about fixing yourself because you're broken, let's just change the perspective of the entire conversation to that we're trying to find freedom where we feel confined, where something is confining us to a certain behavior. We feel restricted. So instead of being free to dance with anything, we feel restricted by an old pattern, as opposed to you're broken and you need fixing. I think that's the first place we need to start. I know there's another aspect, Adam, that we want to make sure we head off right at the beginning.
Absolutely. So a big fat disclaimer before we start this conversation. Because it's a sensitive one, the rates of addiction in the United States are going up for lots of different reasons. So this is a hot button topic for a lot of people. Either they are addicted and in shame and guilt and recrimination, or everyone knows somebody who's struggling a little bit. So we want to just start off by saying, neither Jennifer or I are medical professionals, nor are we licensed clinical psychologists. We're coach and mentors and guides who've been working with lots of folks for over 20 years. And so there's a couple caveats that we want to make. Number one, anybody who's trying to deal with addiction, we fervently advise that if you're looking to change and shift away from this pattern of belief, you need to get medical help first and foremost. We have some tools and suggestions towards the later half of the show, but we want to make sure that you folks know that we have a great deal of reverence around this topic and don't blithely throw around suggestions based on empirical evidence or anything. So it's nothing to fool around with, and a lot of people do get a lot of relief from seeking out medical professionals or clinical psychologists in order to assist them to break the cycle. Ultimately, it's our choice whether or not we're going to continue in addictive behaviors or not, but when it comes right down to it, we need all the assistance we can get.
And it's easier to choose sometimes when you get medical help. What we're going to talk about tonight is what you can do in your conscious moments, and what you can do as a short-term tool to, like as a tool in the moment to break out of addicted thought patterns and cycles of behavior. We're also going to talk about, which is what we're really interested in, is breaking the long-term default position that has us become addicted in the first place. Like, true freedom is when you don't even have to think about the tools anymore. So we're going to talk about what it takes from our experience to actually shift such that the entirety of the way you approach life becomes from a place of freedom. So if that interests you, then stick around. We're going to have a great conversation. And we as Adam's saying, this is just, there are some really serious addictions out there. So, it's not like my addiction to chocolate, So,
or is it?
Or is it? Well, yes.
That's
in seriousness, no. In seriousness, no. but the biochemistry that happens in the body is actually very similar. It's just some addictions have huge stigma. They also can cause a lot of pain in family. Eating a lot of chocolate is not going to cause a lot of pain to my family. In fact, most of my family will be really happy that I bring some chocolate over. So that's.
I mean, it's going to come right down to it. I think in this discussion about whether or not we're, you or I or any of us are entangled around a certain behavior, whether that's chocolate or anything else. But we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yes, we will. It's going to be we really take out your notebooks, make some notes. Please, if you have, certainly we have the chat room open so you can join in on the chat. We'll talk a lot about addiction to paradigms, addiction to belief systems, addiction to thought patterns and where that comes from, because those are some of the things that get us addicted to the other substances, right? We want to feel better, so we are addicted to the thoughts and the pain and all this kind of stuff until finally it's like, well, I'm going to have to find a behavior or a substance
May
to go
I
to.
offer a perspective?
Absolutely.
Speaking from personal experience, I can say that very often, in my case, the addiction was never about feeling good. It was mostly about not wanting to feel bad.
Right.
Which there's a big difference.
Well, there's a huge distinction right there. Just not wanting to feel bad, right?
Yep.
So the other thing we want to say right off the bat is, if you think you don't have an addiction, everyone has an addiction. What we are addicted to as a society is what makes us feel comfortable. We are addicted to finding ways to feel comfortable, to feel good, to feel like we belong, to feel like we have common beliefs. We don't want to be afraid. Like Adam said, we don't want to feel bad. So now, does that mean it's bad to feel good? No. But it's all about having the freedom to choose to feel good, as opposed to feeling confined by the only pattern that can make you feel just slightly better. Feeling slightly better is more about survival. We're talking about thriving here. And thriving lies in the land of being free. And we want to get to that place of changing your default so you can find freedom. And of course, there are going to be some substances that one is addicted to, that this conversation, there's going to be a lot more than what we're going to talk about tonight that's going to get you there. That you'll have to talk to it's going to take a lot more than what we talk about tonight.
Sure, absolutely.
So as long as you know that we know that, and as long as you're willing to take that on, then great. And if you know anyone, a friend, a family member, or whoever, that has these cyclical cycles, these ongoing, can't get out of it patterns of thought or behaviors that, they think they really need to do, or the world's going to fall apart. They have constant anxiety. That's one. It reminds me of a friend of mine who has a form of OCD where she's addicted to eating clean food and having no clean. It actually is a diagnosable clean environment, everything, and it is actually medically diagnosed. So if you know anyone that it's anywhere from, you have old patterns of thought, those will be the ones that'll be the funnest ones to address tonight, because we really do have some tools. When you have patterns that have stuck around since when you were 20 years old or 10 years old, and they're right in the forefront, they're ready to go, the stuff we're going to talk about tonight is really going to free you up. If you have patterns that you just want to change your default position to, and you know that it's possible, tonight is going to really rock it. For those of you who have some deep, deep-seated painful ones, you're going to see some light, and we're going to do an activation at the end of tonight, a future activation that's going to show you what's possible, that's actually going to assist you to actually feel in your body that it's possible. And that is one of the first steps, is actually being able to see it.
That's where the rubber hits the road.
Abso-freaking-lutely.
Let's do the weekly activation. What do you say?
So the show again is entitled "What It Takes to Change Your Addiction to Anything." By the way, can't do that in a show. Just saying. But man, can you give some tools and some skills and future activate that possibility such that you can open to a whole bunch of freedom and then change your trajectory. That's what we'll do tonight.
Yep. Sometimes it's all it takes is get a little breath. Just a little taste of what it's all about.
Yep. So you can. So every week, guys, what happens is I download a little message, or there's something that happened to me in my life, and I will do a video activation all about it. And it's a program. It's actually a free program we do every week that you can join on our website at thewideawakening.com. And you can look in the upper right-hand side and join those weekly activations. Bam. Booyakasha. Just like that. And
that was violent. That was violent.
Wow.
What you just did right there.
Was it?
Yeah, I'm shocked and dismayed at your...
Wow. So...
if I knew it was going to be this kind of show, we would have rated it R.
If I whispered it, would it be better? Bam. So, anyways, by the way, if you guys, Adam has this habit of sounding really serious, and at first people think that it's like, is he really angry right now? And I'm like, oh my God, we get in so much trouble in grocery stores. So, because he looks really serious and he waits for people to react.
Apparently, there's very little difference between my angry face and my happy face. I think that's the problem.
So our message of the week that we want to share this week, the message of the week from our Wide Awakening weeklies, is: are all of your relationships mutually honoring? Can you feel the possibility that they could be? And the quote to our weekly message went something like this: to actually have awakened, delicious love in your life, you must first believe it is possible. Are you open to allowing true love in all areas of your life? Can you feel that possibility? See, the reason I ask, can you feel the possibility, is because if you can't feel the possibility, then the doorway isn't actually open to letting love in. And I know that Adam and I have gone through iterations of letting love in. The entire universe will give you everything it has. The problem is we have belief systems like, I have to earn it. I have to prove that I deserve it. I have to show that, I'm a match for it. I have to earn my way to that seat in heaven next to God. I have to, I'm not deserving of it. There's all sorts of belief systems, but understand that in the universe, it does not think that way. There's no judgment at all. It really is that question: to what degree are you willing to let love in? Because that is a mutual honoring between you and the universe. If you can have that kind of reciprocity between you and the universe, you love yourself enough the same way that the universe loves you, all of a sudden you're letting all the love of the universe in, and now what happens is you'll let love in from just about everybody. And you'll find your way. Which doesn't necessarily mean that you'll hang out with everybody, because sometimes people have a really hard time connecting to their hearts. So one of the things that we do, that we will do tonight, that I think you'll find really interesting, in order to live, just think to yourself right now, ask yourself the question: to what degree do I actually let love in every way? Do I actually let the universe in? Do I actually allow myself to, let's ask it in a very human way, do I allow myself to be given to? To what degree do you allow yourself to be given to? Right? Just really look and see. The reason I ask the question is, some people don't even know how much they're not allowing themselves to be given to until we do a future portal activation where we actually show you what your life looks like when you are fully given to. Have you ever thought that? Just look at yourself. Have you ever thought to yourself, what the hell does it look like to actually let the universe fully give to you? Do you ever ask yourself the question? Do you ever let yourself imagine it? Do you ever allow yourself to go into that other dimension where that possibility exists and view yourself dancing and singing and playing in that world? How do you operate at the gas station? How do you operate with your sweetie? How do you operate at your work? How do you operate in the grocery store? if you're actually letting it all in. So my dear friends, we'll do a little bit of a future portal opening at the end of the show, so you can actually see what that feels like.
Yep.
So I think, Adam, there was a point in both of our lives, many years ago, where we actually didn't fully know what that meant.
I didn't know until like 12 days ago. No, I mean that. I'm not trying to be facetious. I mean, I had an experience in which it went beyond an intellectual exercise, and I got it in every cell of my body, to the point where there's no way I can ever forget it.
So what happens to addictions when you can actually, Jeannie, you and I sat at a table during our 12-month program in flight school. We co-facilitate that, you guys. So we're sitting there and we're preparing for the class, for the 12 people to show up and to have the conversation. And what happened was they were saying to me, basically, and trust me when I say, my ignorance was pretty obvious at this point, because I'm just, living my life thinking that everybody sees things the way that I do. So I want to make sure right now that you're not thinking that what I'm about to say, I'm saying so that I can put myself above Jeannie and Adam. I'm saying it because it's just what happened. It's just, I don't know why I see this way, but I really do see the world holographically. So I can see the future trajectories of where everything is going to head.
You're just a freak. That's
So I know I am a freak. But so I always know there's a way. I can see people holographically. I can actually see the trajectory they're on. It's part of why we do what we do. So I didn't even realize that I could always see that there was a way. It never occurred to me that there wasn't. But as I was talking to Jeannie and Adam, you share with them what you expressed. You expressed to me something.
Well, yeah, I just kind of blurted it out that, I don't see the way she sees. I mean, I have a particular gift or innate ability that I can bring to bear, but it's not that.
Right.
And if you're talking from that perspective, it sounds like Greek to me, because I have no context with which to be able to place it. And the more you're trying to convince me that it's true, the more reticent my ego gets and more dug in. It's like, yeah. And then, of course, the perfect circle jerk of all is like I get to start judging myself that I'm actually judging what you're saying. So I get to just kick my own ass all the way up and down the street. So not only can I not see what you see, but I'm judging the fact that I don't see the way that you see.
Right.
But Jeannie kind of chimed in as
and
well.
And also judging me.
Yeah, Jeannie chimed in.
Judging yourself for judging me.
And I think maybe that was the first time where you like... Because you can see that way, and because you also see that the potentiality of every single person on the planet is to be able to see that way, you assume that it's happening. Yet, sister, you gotta, come.
So, but the reason, that's what you were thinking at the time. But
yeah.
But the reason I bring it up is because you were talking about having the experience of actually seeing everything that's possible for you. So you saw in an instant everything that I see all day long.
Yeah.
And what happened? So what do you think happened to you? Like, I think it's such evidence for why those future portal activations are so important, because your portals opened wide up and you could see the possibilities and the potentials for your life. You could just see it. So what happened to you? What happened to the addictions because you went there? You had that experience.
Well, they become superfluous.
Why?
It's just in a weird twist of irony. They just didn't seem. They seemed very, very much less important to what was calling me forward, as opposed to what was calling me forward. So there's several things that I don't do anymore, which I can't talk about in mixed public. But so as I've basically come off that experience, or allowed the integration to happen from that experience, I realized that that there's still more to come, and it's evolving even more. But again, it was like an instantaneous switch in my body when and I've said this for a long. My suspicion is that for me, as long as it's an intellectual exercise, then it's really easy for my ego to argue it away or collect evidence against it. But once it became a cellular experience for me, that's why I think there's so much powerful work being done around NLP, because it's a way of physically anchoring a particular thought or emotion in the body. But this went beyond that. But to your point, after I'd had that experience, a lot of the habitual ways of thinking, where the back was broken of that. Not to say that it didn't rear its head every once in a while, but I've become much more masterful at being able to pivot away.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is why Get Out of Your Own Way is so powerful, because
Yep.
that's what we're doing in every one of the 5 classes. It's like a future activation of who you really are. So I wanted to explain that a little bit, because for me, it's just, it's one of the pieces of transcending
Yep.
addictive behaviors.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the next thing is,
Wait, can I just blurt something out and possibly upset some of our audience?
seriously,
Yes, because okay, so my instinct is that we're all addicted.
yeah, I would say with a very few exceptions, we are addicted to things that we perceive keep us safe or make us feel less bad.
Right. But I mean, doesn't that come as a shock to somebody who's probably not necessarily aware that, like, they would probably say, well, Adam, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I'm not addicted to anything. Like, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't shop online, I don't do any of those things.
So can we give a couple of examples in our lives of thought patterns that can be, like, even though it's not like addiction to spending or addiction to...
Right. So, yeah.
Okay, so I can give one.
You want? Oh, not that one. Don't talk about that one. No, really.
Yeah.
It'll embarrass me.
Right. It won't. So anyways, for instance, here's an example of an innocuous seeming addictive pattern, but it's not. And that is that when my bank account gets to a certain level, these bells and whistles go off in my head, and I get into, oh my God, things are out of control. Now, is that out of control? Now, is that true? No. But there was a time in my history when I think our family went bankrupt, and when I was a little girl. And I think I just have a memory of the energy in the house. And what happened was, it hits a certain vibe, or it hits a certain number, or it hits a certain feeling, and all of a sudden I regenerate the same chemicals that give me the same feeling in my body through a thought pattern related to, this is out of control and I've got to get it back in control.
Right.
And so what's giving me that pattern of thought, even though it's completely irrational, because I'm always taken care of, the universe completely has my back, I absolutely know that. The difference from 10 years ago to now, however, is that 10 years ago, I would have been probably 20 years ago, I would have been, a month or two in that scared place.
Sure, absolutely.
Now, for instance, I had a brief moment with it today. It lasted less than an hour. So that's the kind of thing that shifts. I didn't realize really the depths to which it affected me until today. And when you're at this, when you kind of bring it to this, when I bring it to this much of my awareness, it's like, oh, good, it's up to leave now. Now I can finally be free. Like, we can use the technology to have it just be free of it, because I don't even want to do that dance anymore. I don't even want to have to use the tools. So, but that's what we're talking about when we're talking about addictive thoughts. Do you have an example of one, sweetie?
Sure, I have several, and maybe I should.
I only had the one because
you're perfect. Other than that
winning
one,
Enlightenment Olympics.
Well,
I'm winning.
That may in fact actually be an addiction. Or else why would J.P. Sears make such fun of people?
Oh my God, he's so funny.
He's taking it to the nth degree, but he's actually illustrating a perfect point about how some people become evangelical about a particular way of being, and then they get entangled with it. So
you get righteous.
Religiosity for sure.
For sure.
buddy and I were sitting outside this particular facility, and we were taking a break from work, and we were smoking, and we were trying to figure out exactly why we smoked, like whether or not it was to, this was in the hospitality industry, whether it was to take a break or whatever. And my buddy said something very, very enlightening. He said, I think I'm addicted to solitude. I think that's why I smoke. I think I just like the feeling of solitude, so I can separate myself from everybody, because clearly in a kitchen or any hospitality environment like that, you're surrounded by people. So it wasn't actually the cigarettes he was addicted to. He was actually addicted to the feeling of solitude, being able to break away from folks. So the cigarette was a mechanism by which he could actually feel that in his body. I know for a fact that for a long time I had alcohol entangled with work. So the stress of work, I would come home, and the first thing I would do is I would have a drink. I wasn't necessarily addicted to the alcohol per se, but what I was addicted to was how the alcohol made me feel. As soon as I ingested it in my body, I could feel parts of my body loosening up and relaxing. And that's what I was actually addicted to, was this feeling of relaxation. But then it kind of snowballed in that there was really no way for me to relax other than having the alcohol.
Right.
You know, I couldn't go out to dinner and just have one drink.
Right.
Because I could still tense in my body. And this is prior to the show going live. Jennifer and I had a very live conversation about, you know, the degree to which you're addicted to any particular substance is probably related to the rapidity with which your brain and body can seek relief, because ultimately it's about the interplay of neurochemical cocktails in the body. And whereas some things bring you instant relief or instant reaction, such as cocaine or meth or completing a purchase online or something like that, you can instantaneously change your body chemistry right from that second. Maybe thoughts take a little bit longer, but is there any real difference between the neurochemical interplay and that which you were seeking, which is this feeling of not being scared or feeling good enough or relaxing? I mean, I think it's fascinating, and I don't know if there's...
Or feeling under control, or feeling all of those things. So I think where we need to begin, I think there's another example I'd like to give. Like, so another addiction could be addiction to, like, so people call it comfort food.
Sure.
You know, comfort food makes us feel, but you know, ice cream was a comfort food. But I got to tell you, it's so funny.
It's
a comfort
named
food.
Appropriately.
While I'm eating it, it's comfortable, but the next day I feel like I have brain fog and I'm bloated and it feels terrible. So it actually isn't comfortable at all, which is really funny. But it gave me the instant feedback. But the other thing around thought addiction, I really want to be clear, because it's easy to talk about. It's easy to understand alcohol addiction. Mm-hmm. You know, we understand, like, that's a thing, right? Mm-hmm. But what about the addiction to you trying to prove yourself? Like, for what you do if you were addicted to trying to prove yourself is people would offer you things, people would give you things, people would be very generous with you, but you wouldn't accept them because you would think that you have to prove it first, right? Or you're addicted to making people around you wrong. You're addicted to judging people because you're very worried you need to protect yourself. And if you can push them away before they judge you, great. You're addicted to doing that as a protective mechanism. So
I have another example. So I met this person, and he was being very generous about his history, and he was kind of a rough dude, and although made a lot of money, he very often would implode and find himself in hotel rooms with, you know, all kinds of bad things and all kinds of bad people. He could almost write it in a calendar of when that was going to happen, and it wasn't until a little while later that he realized that what he was actually addicted to was chaos. Chaos in his life. Kind of like someone else we know.
Sure. So, but being addicted to chaos is really about, like, it's a great way to be distracted from your life, right? It's like then you don't have
or
to...
cause distraction.
Yes.
Yeah.
so that you don't have to actually get on with things. So that is true of all addiction. It's an amazing distraction from the path you're being called to. Let me say that again. That is the great thing about all addictions, whether they're thought, whether they're shopping, whether if it's OCD behavior, whether it's, whatever it is, all the way to heroin. It's an amazing distraction from actually getting on with, your life. And yes, when I mention heroin, I can feel people thinking like, wow, but that can change your entire biochemistry. So you just go over a cliff and then there's no coming back. Absolutely true. So not that there's no coming back, but it's going to make it really, really hard at some point.
Right, but again, it all comes back down, and my only comment is that it varies in degrees. If I had, which I did, had an habitual way of being around needing to prove my worth and to prove that I'm trustworthy, that affects everything I do. And as we recently learned by going over some studies and looking at Joe Dispenza's work, is that those habitual thoughts attached to a emotion actually create neurochemical cocktails that are released into the body, putting the body into stress, releasing more cortisol, putting the body into fight or flight, changing the chemistry at a molecular level. And then what happens is the body gets addicted to that and wants more of it. I was addicted to opiates for 5 years. I quit cold turkey. That's so hysterical, not hysterical, but so odd that we were watching the show yesterday on HBO about these folks really, really struggling hard about opiate addictions. And Jennifer looked, and there were a couple people who went from pills to injection of heroin, and she said, how did you not do that? And to this day, I don't know. I'd be the last one to say, oh, I was strong, or it just never presented for me. Anyway. So, but for weeks and months thereafter, my body was signaling to my brain that it wanted opiates by producing what they call phantom pain. So even after you stop, your body's addiction at a chemical level still exists.
It's at a biological level.
Yes.
So now, guys, just listen, because what I'm going to say right now is a little controversial, but it's not really controversial because it's obvious. If you have a thought pattern, and it was triggered by some PTSD event when you were younger, like my parents. It was probably PTSD for my dad. Not that my parents did a good idea.
Your mother's an angel.
Yes.
In case she's listening, you're an angel, Pam.
My dad's awesome too.
He is.
But they protected us from the information. But that traumatic event for them also affected me. So I got secondarily traumatized, let's say, without even knowing it. And then I had a bunch of chemicals happen whenever it felt like monetarily things were out of control, right? And so chemicals would get produced every time life looked a certain way. And those chemicals, the addiction to looking for when it's going to be out of control, and the addiction to that everything has to be in control, wherever my threshold is for that, is not actually freedom. It still produces a bunch of chemicals that go on in my body. And those chemicals are no different than, although, opiates can lead to all sorts of horrible things, but the mechanism is the same, is what we're saying.
Correct.
The mechanism is exactly the same. There's less stigma. A lot of people say, well, that's just your personality. But in fact, you can free yourself of those chemical soups in your body that are actually giving you the behavior. Because as soon as that chemistry in my body, the memory is triggered, it's like there's an impulse that's so powerful to go and try to control or be stressed out or whatever, to try to make sure that everything's going to be okay, which of course isn't effective. And it's also telling the universe that I'm not really interested in the universe having my back. I'm just going to do it all myself, right? Because then I won't be afraid, when in fact the only way not to be afraid is actually to open my heart wide up and let the whole universe in so that the universe can have my back. So making that chemical switch is so important because it's the difference between a life of miracles, a life of expansion and forward, and a life where we're battling the roller coaster constantly. It's survival and thriving.
Yeah, and the great news is that this technology exists, and it always has existed, almost all the way back to pre-biblical times, although it was probably called something different, and we're going to use an example of that later on. But there's a way in which to dance with the quantum field in such that you can actually change your default, but it takes practice and it takes consistency. It's not going to happen overnight, as I explained earlier. Weeks and months later, if someone handed me a Percocet, I probably would have ate it just to shut my body up. But
so yeah. So that
kind of crappy.
That future portal activation is one way. Doing an activation of a deeper truth is another way. Actually doing a reconciliation of the left and right brains so that you instantly have a whole new paradigm for the way you look at life is another way. There are several ways that we'll talk about later that can make those permanent default shifts. But before we even do that, we're going to talk about some tools that you can do in the moment. Because until you make the default shift, it gets very frustrating if you don't have skills and tools, right?
Right. And I think ultimately, for me, where it came down to was, how can I be... Okay, so I've had these wonderful experiences where I've given myself over to moments of creation. I happen to love writing and I love music, and some folks love to dance and some folks love to cut the lawn or run, but I've been given myself over to these moments where I know for a fact that there is a connection to inspiration, whether you want to say that it's the quantum field or angels or whatever. But to me, it feels like communion with the divine. And in that moment, nothing else exists except for this moment. And very often when that moment ends, my habitual thought patterns or acts would rear their ugly head. And so it came to me that I think that...
Almost like there's something wrong.
Yeah, almost.
Like if you're not in that flow,
yeah, the contrast became so
right.
bitter that it's like, okay, so screw that. How can I get away with it? And part of it was realizing that acceptance and compassion for those parts of myself were absolutely essential. That I could be all those things and still be me, and worthy of being here and worthy of my own love. For me, was probably the biggest breakthrough I had. And again, you can get that through all kinds of different ways. There's meditation, yoga, there's all kinds of breathing techniques that you can use in moments when doubt starts to creep up, or this idea of creation. But I know it can change.
Yes.
I know it can change.
Yes.
I know it can change for anybody.
I think that's the first step. Is to know it can change.
Yeah.
That's why we want to do that activation at the end. So guys, we're going to go through a little process here together. The first process is first part of the process is we wanted to share a little bit of our story. So you guys had an idea of... Can
we share the process?
What we've been through.
The story of the process, how we came up with the process?
You're so anxious. Wow.
Anxiety's nothing to sneeze at, okay? It's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is a very big deal. So,
apparently the pharmaceutical companies think so.
Again, some people need that.
Hey, I'm not dissuading again to reframe that. I am not dissuading anybody from anything that works.
Yes, absolutely.
Whether that's doctor prescribed or guru prescribed up on a mountaintop.
Again, what we ask you to do is when you're looking at things that temporarily work, what we're going to talk about is, first of all, the short-term approach that you have power over, and then the long-term approach that you also have power over.
Yep. And
then you may need some assistance, right? So what we're going to talk about, first we wanted to talk about our experience.
Stories.
So we've just done that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to keep up with the stories as well, because we find that stories are very multidimensional and activate all sorts of stuff. Then what we're going to talk about is what every addiction has in common. This is how you'll be able to discern your addictions. We're also going to talk about is it okay to be addicted to good things? You know, we're going to answer that question. Then we're going to ask, what's the difference between, like, is there any kind of addiction to thought versus a substance? Is there a difference between the two of those? And is that, you know, is there somewhere we can have grace for ourselves because of that answer? So we'll answer that. And last but not least, we are going to talk about the short-term tools, probably 3 or 4 of them that you can use in the immediate when you're going through like a food addiction or a thought form where you just can't get off the hamster wheel, or you know, even when you're quitting smoking and you know you're having one of those moments like, oh my God, you know, what am I gonna do here? Like, I really want one. Like, what do you do in those moments? So some by the way, that's the same as you reaching that point where you feel like things are out of control and you want to go and control them. It's the same feeling. It's the same feeling where it's like, no, I really got to go and eat the ice cream, as no, I really want to go and have the cigarette, as no, I really want to go and, you know, control my bank account, as it's all coming back to the same thing. Then what we're going to talk about at the very end is we're going to talk about how to make the long-term shifts so your default is such that you're free. And it's what there is to aim for.
I can't wait. Let's go now.
Let's just skip there.
Quick. I have an addiction.
Yes, I'm addicted to the fast track. So, okay. So, what does every addiction have in common? So, I know there was an experiment, Adam, around rats.
Yeah, it was a fascinating
So listen to this, you guys. By the way, for those of you who don't have substance addictions, but you know that most of your addictions are thoughts or foods or whatever, please, like, it doesn't matter what we talk about. It all relates to the same thing. Just keep applying the concept, like, because this applies to substances. So.
Correct. So there's been an experiment that's been replicated several times over where they take a rat, put him in a cage, and they give him a choice of 2 water bottles. One is just regular water, and another one is laced with some type of addictive chemical, whether that's cocaine or opiates. And over several different study series, the results were basically the same, that the rat would always consume the water that was laced with the addictive chemical to the point of death. And so they made these grand assumptions about the fact that these substances are first and foremost addictive, and that there's no way to actually get around that except other chemical intervention. And this one guy saw this experiment and wondered whether or not this was actually a false equivalency. So what he did is he actually built Rat Park. So he built this huge cage that had wheels and water and other rats, and all kinds of things to interest rats were in this huge cage. Then he did the same thing. He put water bottles, one with regular water, another one laced with, I think, cocaine or some opiate. And what he found was that the rats, having all this type of other interaction in their rat park,
social, quickly
stopped using the addictive chemical and actually just started using the regular water. So from that, his summary is that it's actually community that can break an addiction. That what addiction does, and again, speaking for myself, I remember long ago when someone brought out a bag of cocaine and there was a bunch of people hanging out and it was fun and a party drug, and very soon thereafter, it is all about solitude. In the bathroom, upstairs in your room, hiding it out from everybody.
Because it got a stigma, right?
Not only a stigma, but there's also shame around it as well. And so very often things start out and kind of, this is going to be so much fun, and very soon come all the way down. Yet, so what my experience is that I completely disassociated myself from community. So didn't talk to anybody about it. Didn't share it with anyone else, even my close friends. So because of that guilt and shame, it became something that not only did I not want to talk about, but I certainly didn't want to bring up in conversation of any type. So the fact that this guy found the correlation between the fact of the socialization of those animals and the reduced propensity of addiction, I found to be incredibly fascinating, because I can remember clearly, and a lot of times when I was just behind locked doors by myself.
Well, it's interesting. They also correlate, I don't know if it was the same study, but they also correlated that depression, you're the one that told me about this, by the way, that when people get depressed, especially I think football players, and what they found was that sense of community and common goal and co-creativity is now gone, and the depression happens because like it's just so obvious that we're built to be in community together.
Absolutely.
And the funny thing is, one of the greatest addictions I've ever had, guys, was to being a perfectionist, to getting it right. And I remember a moment coming down the stairs, and I think I've told this story before on the tube in London, and I was carrying my bags, and you know, the I can do it, I'm perfect, I can handle anything kind of deal. And what happened was I got halfway down the stairs after being, just having an exhausting day, and realizing that I was doing everything on my own, because the only way to prove my perfectionism is to do it on my own.
Right.
You can't have other people mess with your perfectionism, otherwise you're not perfect because someone else contributed, right? So it makes you incredibly independent. So what ended up happening was I looked at the person I was with and I said, you offered to carry my bag, I accept, thank you. And they carried my bag down the stairs, and I'm like, I'm done. That's it. It's like, this world is about community. I don't want to ever do anything again on my own. I'm not interested in the perfectionism of it all. I'm interested in how much love can I emanate and how much of a difference can I make. And in a moment, I could see that was possible, and instantaneously the need to prove my perfectness really became highly, highly uninteresting.
Right, but let's be very clear. A lot of these habits,
yes,
whether we want to call them addictions, or to me, it's not as important as to the mechanism of the addiction than the thought pattern. But
oh, by the way, but I did want to make the point that you were making, which was what I did is I didn't tell anyone that I was beating myself up for not being perfect. I didn't tell anyone that I walked around trying to prove things. I didn't tell anyone that, like, I was ashamed of the fact that I was so hard on myself. I didn't want to tell people. I just kept that all to myself. And how many people do that? They just keep it all, how much they judge themselves, how much they even judge others, and they judge circumstances. They just keep it all to themselves, and they just bip along like, but see, in community, what reflects back to you is how much you're loved and how much we can create.
Right, what the people see in you, for sure.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to round back and say, I mentioned a little bit earlier at the top of the show about this epiphany I had.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody to take away from that I think that any of this is easy or that it happens in an instant.
No.
Because it's like talking about an overnight success in music.
No, it built over years.
Right.
That thing in the train station, that
all
was
of a sudden
building
it's
over
like,
years. Yeah.
Like now you're a pop star, but what people don't see is the 20 years that it took to build it, and they certainly didn't see 35 years or 40 years of habitual behavior and arguing for my limitations and trying to break that down, and still, in spite of all that, knowing that there was another way of being, and continually, like, Jennifer and I got into a conversation about 3 or 4 weeks ago, in which I wasn't necessarily representing myself very well and wasn't necessarily very kind or compassionate. And the next morning I woke up and I was determined to shift my way of being. But the first thing I said to her when she woke up was, like, my saving grace is that the me who I really am, is just as stubborn as my ego.
Yeah.
So hang in there, be just as stubborn as your ego.
Or just slightly, like 1% more.
Yes.
Have the you that you really are be 1% more stubborn than the ego that wants to be perfect or get it right.
And let's face it, the ego only wants... it's just a dog wagging its tail. He or she is there to help protect you, to keep you safe.
Perceptively, yes.
And because of that, everything that comes from him or her is fear-based.
Yes.
So a lot of these habitual patterns are just protective mechanisms to keep us safe.
Yep.
Because somewhere along the line, we got an idea that it wasn't safe to be out there. So what's the alternative? Well, let's try to figure out and project forward things that may or may not be scary so that we can kind of clock those and get them out of the way, or at least handle them in a way that we can actually, take a next step into our lives.
So we've been taught that the perfect person is supposed to be someone who has their stuff handled. They don't get addicted to anything. They have loving thoughts. They're kind all the time. They're kind towards themselves. They're sort of pure of spirit. If you can think of someone like that, I would, that'd be great. But there isn't someone like that. Not 100% of the time. So the point being that what we can do is not make the game about getting it right, but make the game out of being more and more free with every day. Not make the game out of we're broken and we need fixing based on someone else's projection of what you should look like, but actually, because as long as you are fixing yourself, you're going to find more ways that you're broken. But again, of freeing yourself more and more, shortening the time in which you are in self-judgment, judgment of others, or the frequency at which you do those behaviors until such time as you're actually free. They don't govern you anymore.
Can I just make just one quick comment?
Sure.
Because, your comment earlier about the stigmata that we place on some addictions and others. Is pretty apropos, and I know I speak only for myself, but I suspect that there's others out there who would agree that in both times I got into trouble with substance abuse, both of those times, the beginning seemed like, believe it or not, a rational thing to do. When I was prescribed opiates after a second back surgery, I was glad for those opiates because those opiates gave me some space and breathing room away from the pain that was there from my surgery. And when I mentioned earlier that, it wasn't as much as like wanting to feel good but not wanting to feel bad, that came soon thereafter. Once the pain was during the healing process, but then it was more about like not really wanting to feel bad, look bad, any of those other things. So I don't hold any judgment for anybody in whatever they're doing in order to deal with these habitual thought patterns. And I certainly understand how something like that could get a toehold, because let's face it, sometimes life is really, really tough.
Yeah.
Car accidents, injuries to your body. You need anything you can because the pain, chronic pain, will make you go crazy.
But if you can't see a way, that's the biggest thing. If you can't see that there's a way, then you'll grab onto anything that has you not feel as bad. That's such a huge distinction for me. Is like really, you have to see that there's a way.
During my addiction, I was absolutely certain that my back was that this was as good as it was going to get.
Exactly.
That my back was only going to be able to perform this much, and that's as good as it was going to get, and I would have this pain all my life. I was absolutely convinced of that. And if I listened to a radio show in which someone was trying to tell me that another way was possible, I would have had some very choice words for them had I not lived through the experience myself.
Right. And so we could say, maybe you guys are addicted to patterns about your financial status. So the same thing could be true. It's like the only way that, I need to be in charge of the finances for the family, because the only way our finances are going to turn out is if I'm in charge of that. And so what you do is you take it out because you're addicted to the control of the finance, because you don't want something bad to happen. And so it's not a way of thriving, but it's a way of surviving again, just like it's the exact same thing you just shared. So when we are talking about, so we said the first thing we would talk about after we told our stories, we would talk a little bit about what they have in common. So let me just recap. One is that addictions have shame in common. They have isolation in common, addictive thoughts, addictive to behaviors, or addictive to substances. They have self-judgment in common, but not only do they have self-judgment in common, hence the shame, they also have the fact that you're judging yourself, that's bad, so now you judge the judgment.
That's the money shot right there, baby.
Yeah.
The money shot.
Or society's already judging you, and now you judge what society judges. Like, as long as you have judgment squared, you never actually get to the root cause of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're isolated, which you already saw in the rat experiment. That's not very good. Speaking about it and letting it be brought out into the light is the best way to deal with it. I can give you, humanity at large, a lot of humanity is addicted to the ego culture. In other words, the ego culture says there's not enough, that there's not as many pieces of the pie. Mm-hmm. There's restricted resources. But right now in the light is that whole way of being, and that whole greedy infrastructure is right in our faces. And the cool thing is, by bringing it out into the light, everyone's catalyzed to do something about it. And we're consolidating as a community, right? So that addiction to the pain, we're starting to see in community that there's a way to shift it. That's a perfect example.
So can I ask a question?
Wait, let me finish all
go,
the...
all right, go ahead.
Keep it, don't forget it, though.
I have to write it down.
Don't forget it.
I won't.
So the next thing is that there's a chemistry, no matter what kind of the addiction. The chemicals in your body stay with you even after you're doing the behavior, and there's a way of transmuting that. But every kind of addiction, whether it's thought all the way to whatever bad, holy smokes thing you can think of, it's all chemistry in the body. The cool thing is, just the way chemistry can change to make you addicted, you're in charge of the thoughts that create the chemistry in the body, so we also have the power to shift it the other way, okay? And the last thing is the distance and space in that we choose the addiction initially because it gives us a little bit of relief. It starts as a little bit of relief, but if we think a little bit is good, all of a sudden, I just want to survive more. And you never get to the behaviors that get you to thriving, because you're just wanting to survive a little bit better because you can't see there's a way. So, yes, your question.
So, if I might, I'd just like everybody to take a deep breath.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's a lot of stuff. And, I can even feel in myself, there's a part of me that's squirming a little bit, whether I am trying to justify my ways of being, or whether or not I'm scared that there still might be a part of me that feels that way, or whatever. But I would just like maybe everybody just to take just a deep breath, just for a moment, and realize that this is not about shaming anybody into action. This is not about trying to fix something that's broken. This is not about anything else except assisting you and those you love to live as free and unentangled as possible, because that's what we're designed to do.
Listen, if the deepest cut is we're never shown a way, then how could, that's where my compassion comes from. We're never shown a way.
I mean, I remember so vividly how, the feeling of emptiness and loneliness, grasping these ways of being to myself, because I was so goddamn ashamed of them, because I knew something else was possible, but yet I still defaulted to that. So, I wanted to ask you a question. Can you be alone in a room full of people? Can you be alone in a family? Can someone be having these feelings and no one ever know?
Think of how misunderstood we've all felt. Like, everyone that's listening to the show right now, and everyone that's going to listen to it on the podcast, think of those times where you felt like, I don't belong. I am alone. Nobody really gets me. Nobody really understands me.
No one will understand.
Yeah, no one will understand what I'm going through. And the thing is, as long as we make other people understanding us the issue, instead of making, hey, there's always a way, an issue, but when you've never been shown that, it's very easy to get into that grease line, slippery slope to hell. Right?
I prefer to think of a grease line, slippery stripper pole to hell. Was that too much? Too much. Okay. Clearly, I'm not being sensitive.
Doink. So now let's ask this question. Just think, and then I'm going to ask our audience to ask the same question of yourself. What about being addicted to creativity and gratitude and love and having fun and all that kind of stuff, Adam? What about that?
I'm sorry?
What about being addicted to looking at your phone and...
Because of tech members trying to communicate with us?
What about... No, I'm joking around, sweetie. What about being addicted to... Sweet... I wish you could see his look right now. What about being addicted to...
That's okay. It's also being videotaped, so you guys will be able to see this on the playground.
Right. So what about being addicted to good things? Like, for instance, I mean...
Okay, so all right, so let me put it this way. I knew somebody who loved to work out so much that she did it all the time, and then she stopped menstruating.
Right, because she had no fat in her body.
Right. Now, working out, keeping yourself fit...
Supposedly a good thing.
Right? Mm-hmm. I also remember how she used to feel on days that she didn't run, which was anxious, boxed in, not feeling her best, almost like she wanted to do anything she could to get to the gym.
So it's almost like smoking or whatever.
So is there any other difference than this neurochemical cocktail that we're used to producing and we can't produce it anymore? The body's just telling us, nope, gotta have it, man.
Yeah, totally. So it's the same thing. That an addiction to a so-called quote unquote good thing.
Yeah, I mean, another great one is, well, she's got a great work ethic because the person's willing to come in early and work late. Now, there may be great reasons for that. Maybe it's a trade that she wants to learn, but maybe it's about feeling worthy and feeling good about herself.
But what is the distinction, therefore? See, here's the crux that I think is so important. What, sweetie, is the distinction between because you can turn anything into an addiction. Absolutely. It feels like, right? You could turn, like, shopping is fun for me sometimes, but I'm certainly not addicted to it.
So as far as I can understand it, and from my experience, not only being, but also guiding and mentoring others, is that you're either free or you're not. You're either free to play with it and free to be gone with it. Either empowers you or it disempowers you. Either you're going to give your power away to it or it is going to enliven and enrich your existence.
Oh, I have an example.
Jennifer, may you like to...
You calling me?
Yes, I'm calling on you.
Thank you, teacher. So it reminds me of, I know people... So, for instance, when I grew up, everyone went to Anglican church, right? So everybody around me went to Anglican church, but they felt like they had to, or they're going to go to hell, or they had to, or something, or they had to, or I'm not sure what.
Fear is a powerful thing.
Right. So what happened to me is, first of all, I realized that it wasn't giving me freedom at some point, because you're impetuous and... as a kid, you think you know everything.
They did not like your mockery.
No, nope. I was a little... They were
a little upset with you.
Little tree shaker even back then. Uh-huh. So what happened to me, though, is that I still didn't have freedom because now I didn't want to go to church. Like, I am not going. I'm never going. My mother would ask me all the time. It was still a pushback, and it was not freedom. It was still not freedom. So what happened is I decided to play a game. And the game was I was going to go to as many places of worship as I possibly can and get different experiences so I could find the commonalities within them. Mm-hmm. And what happened to me is I got really good at picking out the stuff that I really loved about the different places. And I just basically ignored the rest. And what it did is it freed me because I started to realize it's like, oh... there's good stuff here, there's good stuff there, there's all the crap and the stuff I don't believe, but I don't believe it. So I don't have to worry about being affected by it because I can take all the good stuff and just leave all the rest behind. So so if you're looking for what freedom looks like, that was one of the things that freed me up because I spent a long time really Like, I mean, in huge judgment of any kind of religious organization. However, I became a living example of, like, I can go anywhere. Like, it really does. I've been to Baha'i. I went to a Orthodox Jewish place. I've been to a mosque. I've been to a Catholic church. I've been to, I was really curious about being Pentecostal. I looked at all of it, and all of a sudden I realized it's just a bunch of people. And it's just a bunch of stuff. And some of the stuff I left behind, and some of the stuff I really liked, and it resonated with me. So it freed me not to be addicted to need to do all that stuff to try to get myself. And I think people can do it with personal growth work too. I need to continually fix myself. I think it's the same thing in religion often. I need to be more perfect or whatever.
I've been to church enough times to view a few folks in the front pews, and their religious ecstasy that they're experiencing during those ceremonies are, to me, feels like an addiction. And I'm not saying anything about any religion, but there's always a couple people who basically swap one addiction for another.
So you can see how people on even ayahuasca, both of us have experienced that, on ayahuasca can get addicted to the feeling from ayahuasca because it's the same kind of rapturous, amazing freedom.
There's a word for that. It's a psychonaut. It's someone who wants to travel inward.
It's the same thing.
Continually uncovering this unknown landscape. However, in a body on a planet, there's not I don't want to say reality or hard reality, but the fact of the matter is we're in our bodies in this particular time and place because there's things to experience and things to do.
So what about what feels good? Is it bad to want to feel good?
I would say no. No. But again, if it's entangled with other ways of being or the way you feel about yourself, I mean, again, is that any different between, okay, so I was thinking about this a little earlier. I remember a time in my life when I dressed a certain way, I spoke a certain way, I acted a certain way because I wanted to feel good, but mainly because I was trying to express my own freedom of self. And it wasn't too long after that where that constant effort of trying to express myself or search out freedom became a prison of itself. Right? Because now
I want to be different and rebellious.
Now I'm so unique that I'm actually in a different clique.
Right. Called the I Don't Belong Rebellious Captain Chaos Clique.
Right, but I'm just saying one leads to another unless there's for me it comes down to how can I express who I am in the most authentic way possible in every moment of my day.
So I just realized something.
You did? Just now?
Yeah, I think it's very juicy.
Okay, go ahead.
And that
Lay it
is,
down.
which is very related to what you said, which is when we finally relinquish the need to be perfect, get it right, or fit in. The only true addiction worth having is an addiction to being in relationship with what's presenting in your life and being able to listen to that, being able to go direct with consciousness, being able to honor oneself, and being able to know what it is that you're being inspired forward to.
I just want to be addicted to the dance.
Right.
I want to be addicted to the dance and the interplay and kind of like both the highs and the lows, understanding that it's all part of this really incredible, irrepressible, fleeting experience.
But then, if you are getting really proficient at the dance, is it really an addiction or is it just really a lot of fun?
Well, I mean, you make that point eloquently and succinctly, but if I was going to shift my desire to something, right, that would be it. Like go, and you've said this often enough about curiosity, like to be really curious about what it looks like and what it feels like. And I've found increasingly that curiosity is a great tool to have, especially in the face of either setbacks or daunting times or whatever, to be endlessly curious about either what it is or what's going on in order to like not stay stuck in the why it happened.
Yes.
Or why it's going on, or why do I continue? No, just be curious about, what else is possible.
Some people are actually even addicted to asking why, which is a complete distraction from
That's all
how
it
do
is.
I enjoy the dance.
Oh.
The only question really worth asking, like the biggest question worth asking, is how do I enjoy the dance more? How can I get more proficient at the dance with consciousness?
How can I get more proficient?
Right?
Right, yeah.
How do I have more fun? How do I dance in fluidity? Right?
Right,
so,
and you could call that consciousness, you could call it the quantum field, you could call it guides and angels, you can call it God, you can call it Krishna. Doesn't matter. It's all going to, in the end, it will be revealed to be all the same.
So, maybe. But what I would say is this, is then let's answer that question. Let's talk about the tools now.
Okay.
Let's talk about the tools to actually have the short-term shifts. So you're in an addictive pattern. Maybe you're like dying for ice cream. Maybe you're dying for a cigarette. You really want a cigarette. Maybe you're you really want to control something because your fears have kicked in. Whatever it is, you really have a trigger. So we have
rule number one.
Yes.
Or suggestion number one.
Yes.
Is
suggestion number one.
Is embrace and practice transparency and vulnerability at any cost. Find yourself somebody that you can talk to and just lay it out. Do not hold it in anymore.
So speak it out and be in community. Right? It's like being related to someone. In other words, it's like the rats. When they were isolated, it wasn't,
right, but
nothing was being shared.
But you need to be committed to that transparency and that vulnerability, because I know myself, have been in groups of folks where I've just kind of like listened and, participated mentally and kind of skirted around the issue.
Yep.
And then walked out and then defaulted back to the same behavior.
So it's really finding the people that you can do that with. And actually telling them that's what you want to do sometimes. And then they can do that with you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You have to ask permission to do that.
Okay. Numero uno.
Because some people might not be able to hear that.
So, totally hear you. The next one is along the lines of community. So, for instance, in my general vicinity, in our general vicinity, there's a little place called the Jubilee Center. Jubilee Center isn't church per se, but it sort of is. It kind of is. It's like Ashevillean,
multi-dimensional.
Yeah, it's awesome. So it's
filled
with people that want to see possibility, and it happens every Sunday. If any of you are in the area, I highly recommend going there.
Their big thing is expressing community. That's where they're really down with.
And they really operate from the premise that there's always a way. Mm-hmm. And when you're around people that show you that there's always a way, it actually does something to you. So, for instance, online for the Wide Awakening, we have a place called the TWA Playground. And if you haven't registered for it, it's at thewideawakening.com/groups with an S /TWA Playground. And Adam and I and Sonia and
Jeannie.
Susanna and Jeannie, we go on there and we actually play there, and it's filled with people that are posting really cool the whole, and the more we share, the more inspired everybody gets, and it's an online community like that, right? So there's something about knowing that there's a group of people that know that there's always a way.
And while that is powerful, that can still happen in a room with you alone. So whenever possible, find a local community group or a local group to be part of. Jennifer was talking about Jubilee. I actually belong to a men's group, and we meet at secret locations at undisclosed times. It's a secret. Shh, don't
be very, very quiet.
But it's an experience unto itself, and rule number one is complete honesty and safety within the group. And speaking as a man, it's a gift that I very rarely have had, and so there's I can say anything I want in that group, and there's no judgment and no crosstalk and everything. It's a fantastic way to express, but I also find that in connection, in proximity, in a room, really does matter.
For Adam, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, it does matter.
Going to Jubilee does it for you, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
It does. It does. But why I'm saying that is because there's another way that I'm thinking of that I found with people who are really sensitive. I think you've done it. I think I've done it. I'm only saying it because I've seen other people do it. And that is, some people seem to have this innate ability, or maybe they're closer to being able to do it than other people, and that is being able to connect to their higher levels and actually have it be that their higher levels are just as real as, you know what I mean? Like, because some people I know sometimes when I can't go out, or I'm too far away from people, or I'm, you know, all the stupid excuses our egos make.
Great distraction.
Yeah. But I remember...
We are in a body, on a planet, and being in community with one another.
It is...
In a physical presence is a powerful thing.
It is very powerful.
Powerful. That's my only point.
It is very, very powerful. Yes, it is.
And if you can't find one, create one.
Bingo.
Meetup.com is a great place to start.
Absolutely. And remember, your higher levels are always with you. Being able to make that connection has been such a godsend to me, right? But you're absolutely right in that you can't do that every day, all day long. But
it
you
helps.
could.
It helps. I mean, it's a great tool to have. And so is the playground.
Yes.
You know?
All of it.
All of it is.
Yeah. The problem is when we've been like in the not belonging club, we've become addicted to the thought that we're independent.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
We can do it all ourselves.
Or that we're too galactic, or that we're too sensitive, or that we have to protect ourselves.
I'm really sorry. I could see that you thought that I was like kind of dissing your... That we need, but I wasn't trying to do that.
No, I know.
Okay, good.
I know.
Okay, so
don't ever do it again.
So the next thing is that Adam and I both do is we both have coaches and mentors, which I suppose is another way of being in community.
Yeah, it certainly is.
But it's a really powerful way of, like...
it's like direct action.
Yeah, it's someone who is committed to you seeing who you really are, so that even when your goofy, addictive patterns are running, they're like, yeah, that's nice that you're sharing that, but here's what I see. Right. And they show you another way. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the Einstein quote that says you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it, right? So when you have someone that's committed to seeing you when you don't see yourself, let me just say, huge. You have a couple of examples. I mean, Adam and I and everyone, actually most people I know that are successful in the world have someone like that.
They have coaches, guides, mentors, and mastermind groups.
Yep.
Almost always.
Yep.
If you see someone flying at a high level, it's because they've had assistance of that nature.
Yeah.
And, you know, not going to say anything against family and friends, lovers, but, you know, they have a vested interest in your emotionality or your balance or whatever. So very often they may or may not call you out for behavior that's less than what you're capable of doing, but a coach is not ever going to do that. The commitment between a mentor and a mentee, or a coach and a coachee, is that, you know, above all else, truth first. And so we get to serve that in these relationships, and sometimes it means calling each other out, because it is a symbiotic relationship, and that's what I really enjoy so much about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have you've had loads of mentors when you were a chef, and it wasn't so much. I mean, sure, some about cooking and stuff, but you had a lot about leadership and being a good person. And,
absolutely. Yeah. Very, very little of it actually had to do with true cooking,
right.
And that's the gift that I ended up giving while I was in that industry. But I do not do that anymore.
I see. Well, when I was in nutrition. You just went and worked with a whole bunch of people, which allowed you to be able to go into the next chapter
Yeah,
of your life.
absolutely.
And that's because you worked with some other people.
Yeah, I needed assistance in
Right.
pivoting away
There you go.
and doing what my heart was calling me to do now.
Right. And right now I'm making some shifts too. And I can tell you right now, I got a support system beneath me because I do not expect that I can do it alone. So that's the importance of coaching and mentoring. So, and it's one of the reasons why Adam and I coach and mentor, because we've had such amazing people in our lives that have catalyzed us that, you know, we both work with people who want that kind of guidance.
I do it for one reason and one reason only.
Why?
Because someone stood for me,
Yeah.
I stand for others.
Yep. It would be, for me, it's that, I know this is true for you too, where it's like, it would be such a shame for that not to be paid forward. You know what I mean? Like everything that we've gotten from all of these amazing people, it's like, but it's not just what came from the people. It's then our unique vortices of awareness then took that and evolved it beyond and beyond and beyond. So
The fact is that gift, for me, just speaking for myself, but receiving that gift, the best way to honor that gift was to give it to someone else.
It deepens.
Yep.
Yeah. So the next thing is around, so all of these things are things that you can do. Now you might think to yourself, these are tools and skills, and we're not really talking about what you can do in the moment where you're having that feeling like, oh my God. So I had that moment today, and the tools that I use are very simple and everyone can use them. There's 3 questions. One of those questions is the feeling that I'm having right now mine? And I realized the feeling that I was having right then was actually my parents' feeling based on the fact that there was a bankruptcy. It wasn't even my feeling. And you can guarantee, if you really look deeply, that the autopilot feeling that you're having is based on an old pattern. The next thing that I did is I collected evidence for the fact that things actually always do work out for me, especially when so I thought of 3 incidents where everything worked out, despite the fact that I had the same feeling. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, all right, I gotcha. So the last thing was, what can I do right now that would empower me to come back to my heart? What can I do right this second? And I was at our beautiful Y here in Arden, North Carolina, and instead of working out in the gym that we paid for, I went for a walk in the sunshine and the trees, and just got into my heart and gratitude. Particularly, I don't know if Adam felt it, but I was feeling a lot of gratitude for him. And so there were 3 things that I did that were really powerful in the moment. But the first question for me is the feeling I'm having even mine? Like, is it even valid? You know, is it even valid in mine? And the answer is it actually is always no. It's not mine. It came from some pattern, from somewhere else, from something else, from society, from some judgment by a organization or whatever. So, and it's really good to start to collect evidence for the fact that it pretty much has always worked out, mostly when you weren't in control. Right? So, what do you do when you're in the moment right in the moment, sweetie? What do you do when you're right in the moment and it's like you've got an impulse and you successfully thwart the impulse?
I close my eyes and I breathe.
And what happens?
Well, in the moment, nothing happens. But that's kind of the point. Where I used to take opiates to give me a little bit of breathing space away from my pain.
Yes.
Closing my eyes, putting my hands on my lap, and just focusing on my breathing actually gives me a little bit of space between whatever that trigger might be, whether it's going to go have a cigarette or being prone to anger or anxiety or whatever. Just a couple breaths in, a couple breaths out, but focusing on the breath primarily.
Yeah.
It gives me a little bit of breathing space, and when I open my eyes, it seems like things are not quite so urgent.
Very cool. Yeah. Such an easy thing.
It's a tactical tool.
And it's free. So, the next thing you and I talked about earlier was an infrastructure, like a support infrastructure. Making sure that you have an infrastructure to be able to...
Well, we talked about it, discipline and practice.
Discipline, and so there's like disciplines. So, Adam Lamb, what do you do as a daily discipline?
So, there was somebody, cheers Lynette, who first suggested that I meditate. And I played around with that and couldn't really see her point. And then something happened and I got a different perspective on it. So here's what I do every morning. Mm-hmm. It's so funny. So weird. But because I spent most of my life kicking my own ass, the first thing that I do every morning when I wake up is I sit out on the balcony and I take a deep breath and I get my heart grounded to the earth. And then I acknowledge myself. I acknowledge myself for the piece of puzzle I am on here on earth, that I am incomparable to anyone else and unique, even though that we are all the same, and that I give myself credit for everything that I've experienced and just really radiate gratitude for still being here and still drawing a breath. And then, so it's acknowledgement, and then I say my prayer for all the people that I know here and gone. Mm-hmm. Ascended Masters, spirits, guides, Jennifer, my kids, everyone, and just really get in my heart and feel what a blessing it is to have them in this life. Then I take a moment to own all of who I am, including the bad parts and the good parts in this moment, and like not cutting myself any slack, but also not beating myself up about it. This just is what it is. This is who I am. These are my skill sets. These are my propensities. I own all of it. I love all of it. Then I do a little future projection. Mm-hmm. And then I spend a few moments just in deep gratitude for my pants and the birds outside and this lovely apartment we have, and the abundance that flows through us, regardless of any judgment or anything. Like it's judgment-free time. I just get to kind of express in that way. And then seal it all in with a little bit of yoga. And that's my daily practice. Daily. I do not deviate from that. I get up as early as I can, but even if I don't get up, I can at least spend 10 minutes doing that simple routine.
Yep. Got it. My daily practice is I lie in bed and I actually do deep breathing and I connect to my guides and angels and ask them questions. And
is that what you're doing behind the closed door?
Yes, I am. And then I future project the day, and I also future project like some really cool stuff that would be really fun if it happened, right? Just to play with it. So I open portals to possibilities that, were unimagined prior to me waking up. So I just kind of play with it. And then over the course of the day, one of the habits that I have that I swear by is every time I switch gears, so between clients, between any shift of who I'm talking to or what I'm doing, I get up, I'll either go outside or I will make some food or I will do something to interrupt the pattern to reset my body so that I don't get overwhelmed or get into reaction mode, so that I can stay in my heart. So
just a quick aside, we're going to be doing a really great program, Get Out of Your Way to Rock and Relationships. But yes, one of the things that Jennifer and I have just discovered, like we always kind of knew that this was going to be important, but it's come front and center. So after we do our morning practices separately, we actually take some time to spend outside on the porch and just connect. And that's just some conversation, and then we kind of go over our schedule of the day and really kind of honor one another and kind of let each other into our, not only our business lives, but just open our hearts to that point where no matter how busy it's going to get during the daytime, we know that we're always connected.
Yes, and what that does is it also puts, like, very logistically as well, not just heartfeltedly, which is lovely, but logistically we know what each other is doing, so both of our minds are at peace. And we don't, even though sometimes my mind can be a little bit bubble-headed, but it's all good. So,
Yeah.
so we talked about, so all of those things are things that you can do to cope with the every day. But now what we're going to do is we're going to look at, yeah. So what do we do in order to shift our default? And we want to tell you that in order to shift your default, it actually takes not convincing by an outside source. It really takes what Adam talked about earlier. It takes being able to see that there's a way, being given the tools to find the way such that you become an unavoidable, it's not even a relentless champion of yourself, because you just know that all of the self-management and all of the surviving your life starts to become irrelevant. Because once you know that there's a way, once you discover that there's a way, really the only thing you're interested in is becoming more and more masterful at that way.
Can I just intersect there for a second?
Please do.
So that there is a way is important.
Yes.
But it's not as important as a possibility. Like, to recognize that there is a possibility that exists in which I can walk with my back straight,
Yes.
and my lungs full and my neck without pain, to
Yes.
understand and project to there.
Mm-hmm.
The way, how I get there, is not important. As a matter of fact, the more I think about how I'm actually going to get there, it just mucks everything up in the quantum field.
Yes, it's not that you have to know the way.
Right.
It's more that you just need to know that the possibility of the way
What that
exists.
possibility looks like.
Right,
Exactly. How does it feel to actually walk around that way?
Right.
How does it feel to,
Yes.
hold you in my arms and kiss you incessantly throughout the day? You
Uh-huh.
know, those type of things.
Wow. Who knew?
Those
So-
are the things actually to mount the emotion on.
Right. It's really being able to see the future possibility. That's what changes the chemistry. But what creates the inspiration and the motivation is the fact that if you can see that the possibility exists, then there's a way. Consciousness doesn't give you the possibility unless there's a way. If the way doesn't exist, then the possibility wouldn't exist either.
Yeah, let them show you the way.
You just don't need to know what that is. You just need to show up for your life.
I mean, you can certainly try to manipulate it and control it, but it's just going to slow it down.
Well, and remember, the show is all about addictive patterns of behavior or patterns of thought.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're talking about is shifting to a whole other world of ways of being. And we first started doing this. This is a new technology for get out of your own way. We started doing the get out of your own way before we even learned about certain people who have certain versions of it, like Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, it all kind of lines up.
But it all lines up, because when something so powerful it just becomes what we need to do. It's so powerful. So we're going to show you right now at the end of this program, and thank you everyone for being on the program. We're going to do a future portal opening. And what we're going to do is we're going to activate this future such that the doorways open to all of the ways that you don't need to know. You don't need to know. Don't let your addiction to needing to know get in the way. All you need to know is that there is a future possibility. If you can feel it, your biochemistry can change. Because the same way that those thoughts or those patterns created chemistry in your body, just imagine if relentlessly you future open portals to what your life looks like to be another way, your body responds with the same biochemistry as if it's really happening. So what you're doing is you're disrupting the pattern of your habitual ways while you're in your imagination and while you're activating that future portal so that new chemicals can be produced in your body.
Please understand that it's been proven time and time again that the subconscious does not know the difference between something that is actually happening and something that is imagined happening. To the subconscious, where all those chemicals are produced, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, your imagination is just a different dimension. So it is happening in that other dimension, right? So, okay, Sweetie Pie. can we co-create with everybody what it looks like for everyone to be... Oh, and by the way, everyone, just so you know, what we have coming up, I do want to let you know that we have Get Out of Your Own Way to Relationships That Rock. Mm-hmm. In fact, we did an freaking awesome, Jeannie, Adam, and I did an amazing, amazing workshop that is free for anyone about the skills, the 3 top skills for us. I mean, they have changed our lives. Talk about wanting to pay it forward. We've been developing this for months now, and we did this free workshop called The 3 Skills That Help You Transcend Conflict in Any Relationship. You can find it, and it's a free introduction to Get Out of Your Way to Relationship That Rock, but it all by itself is so powerful. It's at www.thewide-awakening.com/get-out-intro, okay? /get-out-intro. Go watch it, share it with your friends.
So much fun.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It just, and the tools are tools that Adam and I use in our relationship.
Jeannie.
That Jeannie is like masterful at the tool that she shared.
Frustratingly good at it.
Yeah, she's so good at it. And trust me, she's like a little harmony magnet. So, because, oh, you're so funny.
Everyone else but me.
You're so funny. She's like this, she just sprinkles, it's just, so it is our pleasure to be able to pay those forward, and please go and have a look. So, so, so powerful. If you already know that you want to Get Out of Your Way to Relationships That Rock, then simply go to the WIdeAwakening.com and you will find the page to register. So under courses and programs. So, and that is happening in July. It's for 5 weeks, and it will entirely change your life. Because what we do is we do what we talked about tonight, which is we assist you to make the permanent subatomic and cellular shifts. You get the tools as well, but that's where we really dive into changing the permanent way you approach life so that thousands of belief systems start to transmute for the very reason that Adam talked about at the beginning, which is as you start to see and know that there is a way, and see the possibility before you, because you now can see how it could happen because we're engaged in the process and it starts to show you. So what happens is you start to be very disinterested in your old patterns. You start to be much more interested in your flight forward and expanding the tools and the ways of being that we show you. So it's a way of transmuting thousands of beliefs that stop you in 5 weeks and hundreds every week. So, all right. So, and we do this future activation we're about to do every week. We do a new future activation on the subject of each of the Get Out principles behind relationships. We do a new one, activating a new future every single week. But we're about to do a nice shortened version of that of that future portal opening right now.
If you happen to be driving, you probably want to pull over and put the car in park. And if you're holding small children, you probably want to put them down.
Get comfy. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, everybody breathe. Everybody breathe. Take your consciousness behind your eyes. Adam and I are going to do that too. Trust me, to do this, we want to be in the same place you are. So, consciousness behind your eyes. Put everything you're thinking of, if it's like I'm hungry or I gotta go make my bed or, my God, all this talk about addiction or judgment or whatever, you put it all outside. Give it to the field. Your higher levels live at a higher frequency. They will handle it much more graciously than any human being ever could. So just put it all outside of you and just be with us right now. Allow yourself to know that there's a future possibility that exists. That's your life. And that future possibility that exists, if we give it attention and consciousness circulation, what happens is in your body, your chemistry starts to change such that that addictive exchange of old chemicals that give you those old patterns, we can start to disrupt that. So let's project ourselves as someone who's free, someone who's free to thrive, someone who's free to choose their behaviors, someone who's actually free to choose their thoughts, even with things that you've struggled in the past. Let's pretend it's, 2 years from now, and you're already there. You're already there. It's like there's such a sense of freedom. So what does that look like?
What if it looked like a compassionate, kind relationship with your ego, where you get to acknowledge and honor it for having tried to keep you safe all these years, and just love him up or her up, and say thank you for everything you've done? It's a little bit different now. Now Spirit's going to carry us forward, but thank you for doing your job.
And imagine that you effortlessly go direct with what calls you, with what your guidance knows to be true. You just naturally do what's in your highest. It's almost automatic at this point. Like, imagine if you walked around and, even just going into the grocery store with a grocery store clerk, it's you're playful, you're funny, you're silly, you're like, really nothing gets you. You look at your bank account and maybe it's a little bit lower than it usually is, but how you just, all you can see is what you're grateful for that you paid for, all the services that you've received, and from all the payments you've made, and that you're in a constant state of gratitude. And from doing that, what happens is it opens the portals of possibility, so that the next day, of course, you receive exactly what you need. And you're just in that kind of dance, that kind of flow. There's like an ease. You just know that it's all going to be okay all the time.
And what would it feel like in your heart, in this place 2 years from now, when you knew that every person that you met and every moment spent in your day, your heart was almost bursting with this deep gratitude that you were actually here, having this experience, having this conversation, having the opportunity to live your life in deep reverence and appreciation for everything that it is, instead of focusing on what it's not.
Imagine what it feels like with that level of freedom, where you're in that place where you actually have a sense of humor about your old patterns. You actually laugh about them. And just feel the surge of energy, like the consistency of energy right now that you have from being able to breathe that deeply, from being able to let your circulation flow, from being able to just be free of the controlling restrictions. You actually don't have any of it. You can't even find it. So there's this energy that comes from your knowingness, and from a deep sense of knowingness that is now your default, and a sense of peace that truly, not like a manipulative mantra or affirmation, but really you get at a cellular level that all is well, it always will be well, and you're just free to do what presents, that life is bringing you, and you're enjoying, such that the need to be safe is overridden by your inspiration to enjoy your life.
And feel the surprise and delight it surely must be like when in any situation where there used to be a trigger for you or a quick emotional response, what it must feel like to try to search for it in your body and find out that it's no longer there. Wouldn't that be such a joy?
Yippee! So everybody breathe that through. Everybody breathe it through.
Those were juicy.
They were, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody breathe it through. Let your cells smile. Let your atoms smile. Let your molecules smile.
But I'm smiling. Oh, you mean the other atoms?
Atom.
Oh, ATM.
Not Adam.
Got it.
And you can imagine when we do these 5 weeks in a row, like just how, I mean, we get juiced. We love it. So anyways, you guys, we really want to thank you for being a part of the Wide Awakening radio show tonight. I want to thank Rob Teichman for being our technical nexus in the background. And for Miss Sonia Wagner for being here and holding it down and talking to everybody in the chat room. Thank you, all of our new listeners. Thank you, everyone who's been here before. Please share the radio show. If you know that this will help someone, if you know that this will assist someone, if you know that just having a real conversation about this stuff and having someone feel like they've been heard will open something, please do share. That's how the Heaven on Earth it's how we do at the Heaven on Earth construction crew, right? And if you're here, we know you are part of that Heaven on Earth construction crew. So just know that you are deeply loved and you are part of our future portal opening. Truly, you're part of the joy of our life. And you can find us as always at thewideawakening.com. Adam, what would you like to say goodbye?
It's been such a pleasure and honor to be here with you. Can't wait till next time. Come on out and play.
Woohoo! Bam! Booyakasha.
Berto, you want to take us out, brah?
Thank you for joining us for the Wide Awakening radio show with Jennifer Hough. For more information on upcoming programs and events at the Wide Awakening, or to sign up for our Wide Awakening weekly activation newsletter, please visit www.thewideawakening.com. Also, come play with us on Facebook at facebook.com/Wide Awakening.